Hello, good now. This is Ryan Erickson. This channel is Riffing with Ryan. Today, I am Ryan Erickson. I think I said that. I gotta figure that out. I am Ryan Erickson. This is Riffing with Ryan. Today is the premiere episode of This Week in Amplio. What is Amplio, you might wonder. For those of you who don't know, some of you who are watching this, I'm sure you know. But we have the perfect person here to explain what Amplio is, and that would be Mr. Al Shalloway. Hello, Al.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
You are quite welcome. So this is the first time we're doing this, and we shall see where it goes. So we are here. The first thing again we talked about was what is Amplio, who's it for, what's it for? If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit on that, and maybe kind of who you are too.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been in Agile for a long time. I've done a lot of things. I used to be a developer from like 70 to I guess around 2002 or 3. I've mostly developed dozens of applications. And in 99, I had a kind of a career change, actually maybe more back 96, where I started consulting and coaching in development, quickly moved to process. I formed Net Objectives in 99. And for 20 years, we worked with all sorts of companies, both technical and process. I was a kind of a lead on XP, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, design patterns, just a bunch of things. I wasn't at the original Agile Manifesto writing in 2001, but I was actually invited back to the 10-year anniversary because I think it was my Kanban and Lean work. I've been on the forefront of Lean as well. And basically, Amplio is kind of a distillation of what I learned for the 20 years at Net Objectives, where it wasn't just what we did. We actually had a pretty stellar record of work with people and making progress. But I must have gone, I don't know how many, dozens or so conferences, and I would talk to hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I was interested in like, what do you really need to do to make this thing work? And a lot of things were missing in Agile, things that I think are really critical. Systems thinking, a bunch of other things, a foundation of theory that can be there. So I actually went to the PMI for 2 or 3 years and built the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop. So I was kind of a little bit on that too. But I left about 3 years ago, and I kind of decided, my wife wanted to know if I wanted to retire because I could, but I decided, no. I actually want to take a break and reset, take a look at what's happened since like basically 99 when I started thinking about this as a improvement method. What did we miss? What do we really need to do? So Amplio is actually not a framework. It's more of a collection of approaches where you can see what your problem is. I call it the Amplio GPS, obviously, global positioning system. Where are you? I mean, it seems obvious to me you should find your problem before you try to go with a solution. Yet in the Agile space, mostly people are offering solutions and give certification in solutions. I think we should be thinking about our issue. And one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about today is I wrote a book on design patterns back in 2000, 2001. I was studying them in 96. And in fact, patterns, although they've been known for design solutions to recurring problems in a context, if you think about what you're trying to do, like planning, for example, well, you could think of planning as there's a pattern to planning. By pattern, I don't mean just the standard way, but what's the intention of it? Why are you doing that? What are the issues involved? What are some solutions that you maybe want to pick from? If you know Disciplined Agile, you can see this is kind of consistent with the idea of choosing your way of working. So Amplio is actually based on 2 pattern languages. One is organization-wide. These are the things you got to do. That's what I discovered in my thousands of interviews in these 100 or so conferences I went to. These are things that you need for success. And this is different ways to do it. And then there's about 30 at the team level. And the beauty of it is it gives you a way to start simple because you can set defaults. It's like a radio where the defaults are set. I don't have to worry about setting defaults. I'll just take these buttons. Amplio has defaults, but then it enables you to tailor it to yourself or just start out tailored, either way you want to do it. So it's this idea of simple to start, easy to extend. And it includes about a dozen or so things we did at Net Objectives, and I pulled from other places that I don't see in the Agile space very often, at least not by the popular frameworks. So that's a big thing. So that's what Amplio is. It's this overreaching approach to solving your problems in a way that works for you.
Yeah, and not prescriptive. Again, more
No.
seeking. Again, as opposed, and we're talking about frameworks all over. Everyone's got a framework, and everyone thinks theirs is the right one.
Yeah, there is a right
I think.
one.
And that's, I think, sometimes, because you're saying, hey, Amplio is this thing. Amplio's how is it not a framework? Again, if a person doesn't necessarily go in and talk with you or look at the presentations or say, there's something different about this.
Yeah,
and
when you say how is it not a framework, think of it this way: is physics a framework? Well, in some ways it is, because it has these principles, it has these rules, it has these things you need to solve. But it's not a framework in telling you what to do. Rather, you could call it a framework of thoughts and how they fit together and work together. In that sense, maybe you could say Amplio is a framework for thinking, but it's not a set solution from that framework. So we have principles of flow. Yeah, somebody once, I think it was Peter Merrill, but it might have been Wolfram Mueller, talked about like the physics of flow. What are those rules that are there? And see, Amplio builds off these. That's what we talked a lot about this last week that we'll be getting into.
And this last, well, we talked about this. You and I, we didn't talk about that, but
I know there's another thing here.
There's another we that is here.
That's right.
Is the program of the ACES program, the Amplio
That's right.
Consultant Educators program.
So let me explain that. So one of the things that's obvious, but not reflected a lot in the Agile space, is people don't invent very well by themselves. I mean, you can be a spark, you can be a catalyst, you can be a leader. And I actually feel I'm that way. I am those things. But this is really a complex, huge endeavor, because I'm not just committed to having something that people can use to work. I'm also committed to lowering the cost of training and raising its effectiveness. I call this the right stuff, the right way, the right cost. So I put together what I call a learning journey. You have two choices: 6 months program or a year program, but it works really the same. But it basically meets 3 weeks and a week off, 3 weeks, a week off, like that. But there's 6 1-hour sessions in it. And I don't expect everybody to go to all of them. In fact, few do, but some people do. And the sessions are kind of like, some of them are, I present some things, and about half of them are, let's work together on building something. And that's what happened this last week. There's a lot of that. People love this. We co-create the Amplio system based on the experience I have and the materials we've already created. I mean, almost got 2 books on it, and they're not published, but they got Amplio people, ACE people. So this is the Amplio Consultant Educators program.
And the first book of there is that the book with you and Paul Stewart about
the coaching book. So this was interesting. I did an online workshop called Amplio Development, which you can think of as a blend of all the Scrum workshop with Scrum at Scale and DA Senior Scrum Master. It was up to that level of things. And what I noticed, people were asking me, Al, this is great stuff, but how do I convey it to people? And I realized, oh my goodness, it's good to know this stuff, but if you're a party of one, that's okay. But if you're trying to convey it to people, you better know how to convey ideas to people. So I wrote a book. I started writing a book. We now call Being an Effective Value Coach, Leading by Creating Value. And about halfway into it, Paul Stewart joined me because she has some great insights on the being of people, you could say, shared experience that I had also by the work we did with a company she's affiliated with. They're just, I'm not, as both of us have taken workshops from Landmark, which is really a brilliant, both of us had done S before that. So personal development is, it was a little crazy at times, but I did a lot of
S has a colored, storied history.
It does. And I kind of got out of it when at S at the time. It is a little, some people it's a little cultish, but it was really just changed my life in many ways for the better. But I used to help produce some of the workshops as a volunteer. And I was like, there was a trainer up front and I was the guy in the back they talked to. And I was admittedly the worst one in the back. I even got fired once in the middle of a workshop. That was a fabulous learning experience.
Fired.
What?
In the middle of a workshop, you got
Oh yeah,
fired?
the guy said you just violated the rules of the workshop. Go get the. I had a number one guy helping me. Go get. I can't think of his name at the moment. Go get him. He's now the supervisor. And yeah, it was humiliating. But actually, I talked to the guy, and it was the greatest experience for me. I knew he fired me to my benefit, not just his benefit, because at the time,
I say you may not have seen it that way at the time,
No, not that day, but that night he talked to me to make sure I saw what he was trying to do. And I did. And it was like this load off, because at that time, my whole life had been about what I could accomplish. This was in the 80s. It was about who I was what I could do. And I was the same person after I got fired, and I let go of that. I mean, he talked to me. This guy was a brilliant guy, and I knew he was trying to get my interest. And this sounds like a sidetrack, but it's actually not. If you do not understand how people interact with you, how people take change requests, how people take challenges, like what is it, how people interact? How do they get triggered by you? How do they change what you say into what they hear? How do they transition or transform? It's like George Bernard Shaw says, the problem with communication is the illusion that it happened. And I learned all this in the 80s in my training. It's why I've been a good trainer and coach and consultant, is my training is based on a lot of what I learned in the 80s about the human nature. In fact, I'm going to jump ahead to something here because it's exactly this. So we've been talking in the ACE program, the Amplio Consultant Educators, this learning journey where you have we spread it out over the several months so you can try something that you learned and then come back, ask me questions, but it's also just little short hour sessions. But we had this thing called first principles, which is like, delays cause waste, multitasking's bad, stuff that you could verify yourself as being true. And in looking at those this week, one of the things we noticed, and this was like I'm reviewing them with the group and they're telling me how I'm wrong and what I left out, which I totally love. It's just a lot of fun when you don't get attached now to what you know or what you can do, and you can really create. And we realized that we had one of them in there about learning. And I said, well, wait a minute, that's not a first principle of knowledge work. That's the first principle of people. We need to come up with what are the first principles of people learning, which I had been paying attention to, but had never actually written out, which I have now done. In fact, I just made a post listing some of these. And, it's kind of like you learn better when you kind of understand or have some past experience you could relate to. The theory helps learning. Verifiable theory learns better. You learn better when you have that along with what to do. So,
well, what we're saying, experience without theory is basically useless, that kind of thing. Or experience
without theory is expensive because you don't have a basis for creating a model of understanding. This is Deming. Deming goes back and it says you need theory. If you have theory without experience, it's wasteful, it's useless, no value at all. But if you don't understand it, then you can't improve if you don't have a theory that explains things, then you don't have a way of truly seeing, am I understanding this problem correctly? In fact, some people, in fact, I just made this post this morning, understand the principles embedded in a complex system. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, I guess I could actually here, I just get the link here and you can pass it on to people. I'll put it in the chat to you and you can put it on to others. The idea is, we're in a complex system, but there's stuff we know in the complex system. And some of these things that we know, and I'll give you a couple examples so it's not just too theoretical, you got to relate to it. Delays in workflow cause waste. If you're doing something wrong and you don't get feedback to see that you're doing it wrong, then you're going to be working on stuff you shouldn't be working on. You're working on the wrong thing. That's a workflow first principle. Here's another one. This is now learning first principle. People often won't change behavior if they don't understand the why of the change, both the benefit and why it will work.
And that's the whole thing. That's the BS about there's resistance to change. There's no resistance to change. That's how I received that.
Well, there's actually that was another.
We don't have to agree.
No. Actually, I'm trying to look to see where that was. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong list. Resistance to change. This is number 4. Resistance to change is not inherent. Resistance to imposed change is.
Exactly.
So this comes from Margaret Wheatley, A Simpler Way, which is a brilliant book. And so these are the kind of things we talk about, because it's not enough to know what to do. You have to navigate the human field of there. And yeah, people are not just complex. They're not rational in the normal sense of things. They're very rational in what's in their head, but they're basing what's in their head on emotions and based on past experience, past drives that even their best friends don't know. And they don't know. They just get triggered. I got triggered. Except you don't even notice it.
No one can ever know, other than you, what's inside your head. If you don't know what's inside your head, how on earth can someone else know
exactly
that's behind there?
So there are ways. There are ways to discover this: asking questions, recognizing that people really aren't talking to you. Here's number 8. People listen to their own internal conversation more than what you are saying. Okay, now let me explain that internal conversation. If you just ask yourself, what internal conversation is he talking about? That's the internal conversation I'm talking about. This chatter.
That's the self you're talking to, right?
Yes,
I'm talking to myself.
I'm saying words and they're triggering things in your head, and you're listening to more what you're hearing in your head than you're hearing what I'm saying. And that's I learned this from Fernando Flores, like, I don't know, 35 years ago. And he called this your listening, not as a verb, but as a noun, this idea of the listening that's going on in your head. And one of the things we talk about in the ACE program, the Amplio Consultant Educators program, and actually I've been considering doing this as a public workshop, but I can also bring it in as a private one, is how do you speak to their listening? I call that active speaking. Okay. It's like you not only actively listen, but you actively speak to what they're saying in their head. And you can't imagine it, or you can, but you got to validate it.
Well, so, and this is this point, and once you are intentional about what you say, and you're intentional about how it's received, there's this point of giving some space to the integration of that, and inviting some curiosity.
That's right.
That. Yeah,
and this requires basically empathy. Okay, you have to, so if you're listening, if you're trying to tend to their listening, like what's going on, that's being empathetic. That's actually, I'm coming from their perspective, and recognizing you really can't read people's minds. Sometimes you fall into that. Well, I should say sometimes I fall into that trap.
Yeah, well.
But see, this was one of the things I saw in the 80s when I did this work. There were some of the instructors there were amazing. I mean, they were so amazing, you'd almost think it was a vaudeville show where they had plants in the audience. Except years later, I was on the other side of it, and they weren't. They were just that good. And I know how they were good. And this is something also we talked about, is sometimes you ask a simple question when somebody says something, and you ask yourself, what do they have to believe to say something like that? I mean, you don't say that to them. You say that to yourself.
Yeah.
And then you then validate. You validate. Like, where are you coming from? Why do you say that? Like, why do you say that? Not like you're stupid. Why would you say that? But what's the basis of that? And you listen to it not as an argument, but rather as now I understand where they're coming from. See, because that's another thing. We didn't talk about it this week, but we've talked about this and we're building on it this week. One of the things I talked about is what's the difference between experts and people who aren't so experts. First of all, you got to get it's in a domain.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm an expert cat person. I've had like 30, 40 cats in my lifetime. My wife is a cat person. When we first got together, I was allergic to cats.
This is why Al and I get along so well. My cat here, in the studio.
My doors are closed, or my cat would be in my lap right now. She just totally loves me, and I'm good to her now. But some of the earlier cats, I was not a cat person, and my wife and I joked we need to write a book, Cats who love the wrong humans. I was the wrong human, but now I'm a real cat person. But when it started, I told my wife, I can't handle these cats. This is when we were just dating. And I said, honey, I can't take these cats. I'm allergic. She looked me straight in the eye and said, you come with kids. I had 3 young kids from an earlier marriage. You come with kids. I come with cats. And that pretty much tells us about the relation. This was like 35, 36 years ago. I need somebody who can stand up to me, and she does. She's great.
And this is using the active listening, right?
Well, now I know it's important there. So the point is, there's a lot of stuff we know. And yes, we're in a complex situation. And yes, we don't know it all. But the idea of what we talked about this last week of first principles in knowledge work and first principles in learning is you at least have to pay attention to what we do know. And that helps unobscure, illuminate, elucidate, however you want to say it, the stuff we don't know. And this is part of that model of understanding that, oh, I didn't realize there was a side effect here. Now we got it. Now we understand. Now we know why that's going on. So I move forward, not so much through experimentation. We know what we're doing. We know the things we're suggesting. But yes, sometimes some side effect happens. So we need to get quick feedback. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is actually one of the, in workspace, you don't get buy one, the buy one, get one free, but you do if what you notice is that quick feedback, which is an integral part of every agile approach. Quick feedback, make sure you're on target with the market and what you're trying to build. But in the workplace, it also avoids errors. It avoids you continuing to work on something that's not to be worked on. And it also finds these little obscure, complex things we didn't notice.
So and this kind of leads me into a direction in the Amplio GPS and the foundation of the factors for effective value streams. Knowing where you are, would you like to go there, or do you want to go kind of further into the principles?
No, let's stick to this week in Amplio, because those are important things. And I kind of went a little, the reason I went a little deeper here is, I guess it's front of mind for me, is that Paula Stewart in my book, as I mentioned, Being an Effective Value Coach, Leading by Creating Value, it's actually up on the web free as a Google Docs, but it's not quite finished. I'm going to be putting it up on LeanPub sometime next week. But what we realize is, and it's a fairly long book, there are a lot of case studies, a lot of really cool stuff. And people who've read it said it's really pretty remarkable, which I think it is, because it blends all this, how people are with how you coach and how you listen, and also the agile space. It's definitely about improving value. But this realization we had that we needed to find these first principles for learning, which we did, and it's in that post, is I'm writing a pocket guide so much. So you could say for a value coach pocket guide, like talks about these 10, it's only like going to be about 30 pages to get the essence. But a lot of this stuff is based on this idea that embedded in a complex system is a system we can understand. And that if we pay attention to that, what happens is we move forward and we unobscure what we didn't see due to complexity. And so some of those things that you just mentioned, like factors for effective value streams, this is something I came to understand actually in 2019. I remember it. It was like this big revelation when it happened. So when I get these, so from, I don't know, about the beginning of the, turn of the century, 2003 or so, is when I really started getting into looking at more of the process. I'd been in XP, was doing Scrum. I started going to conferences. Those are long gone, which ones I was going to at the time. Then I started going to the Agile conferences. And what I did when I talked to people, this is just how I am. My background's theoretical mathematics, engineering. I got a computer science double degree from MIT, and I've got actually a psychology degree because I've always been interested in that. I like building models. I've been doing this forever. I mean, as long back as I can remember, understanding by models. And I was trying to piece together, was there some consistent behavior? And I had noticed this because in Net Objectives, I had this really amazing, our president was one of the best, maybe if not the best consultant around. He certainly is in the top few, Alan Chedalawada. And he and I sometimes work together. Mostly I would observe him, or I'd had my own clients. But he came to the conclusion first, and then I noticed it later separately. He didn't tell me. And then when I told him, he said, "Oh yeah, I noticed this before." And I was like, "Alan, why didn't you tell me?" But it was that if you looked at like 10 companies, most of them, like 8 or 9 of those companies, would have like a huge commonality in what they had to do. You know, it was like 80% of 80% of the companies have to do the 80% of the same stuff. Now they have to do it differently. For example, they all have to plan at some form. It could be flow planning, it could be big room planning, it could be team level planning, but planning is a capability they have to have.
For value stream delivery.
Value stream delivery, ops, DevOps, things like that. And we noticed what these were. And this is an issue because then how do you know? First of all, there's not one universal way to do it. So it's a problem when you have one way to do something. Even a couple of set ways. There's
one best way. Doesn't that come from some dude back in the early 20th century and Ford, and he worked with Taylor, right?
Well, Taylorism is an interesting story, but yes, there's no one best way. That's the
man of his time. So,
well, yeah, I don't want to go into Taylorism. But there actually was some good stuff there, but there was also some stuff that was misused and not appropriate for nowadays. Back then, it might have had some value.
But we're talking, no one best way for planning.
Right. There's definitely no one best way in knowledge work. Okay, and there's actually no one best way in manufacturing either. That's I think but that's another story. So there's no one best way, but it gets confusing if you offer people lots of ways. People don't like choices a lot. I know they say they do, but marketing has shown if you give people 3 choices, you're going to lose them. 2 choices is okay. If you give 4 choices, for sure, you're going to lose them.
Wow.
And this is why you have packages.
I want to see that research.
Oh, there's a lot. Some people. Okay, so you're an aberrant case, Ryan. What can I say?
Okay, all right.
Ryan's a friend of mine, so I could tell him something. He knows what I mean. I think. Anyway, he knows I'm not being disrespectful.
I definitely do.
So the thing is, you got all these choices, and you have to pick. But there is one that's probably the best or close to the best. Maybe there are a couple that are close to the best that are good for your context. Now, 2 things happen about this. One is, how do you know which one it is? Well, this is what factors for effective value streams are. What happened is I kind of had an intuitive sense of this, and I'd been struggling with this for about 10 years, maybe 15 years. And then I read the book called The Choice by Ellie Goldratt and his daughter, Efrat Goldratt Ashlag. Brilliant books. One of my top 3 books to read, The Choice. Highly read it. I like it better than The Goal, although The Goal I'd read before, so maybe had I not read The Goal, but I think I would have preferred The Choice. Anyway, The Goal's awesome. I'm not saying that's definitely in the top 10. But anyway, he talks about inherent simplicity, Goldratt, about that there are at the core a few things that govern everything that's going on, and that you want to look at that. And he's not saying that it's deterministic. He's just saying if you look at these cause and effects that we can discern, we can move forward and make progress, and people are more comfortable. So they can understand what's going on. This is where a lot of those principles of learning are affected in a positive way. But here's the thing. Go back to this planning. Oh, my God. I'm just learning how to do this. Don't give me 10 choices on how to plan. So what Amplio does and what we teach in the ACE program is how to tell where to start. And there are 2 ways to go, or actually multiple ways to go. One way is, hey, let's at a team level, let's just default to planning like, say, Scrum does. It's no big deal. Or you can make a slight decision. Can I do sprints or not? Because not everybody should be doing sprints. So you can have a default, and then you can have variations of it. But what have I done there? I've got lots of choices, but if I have a default, what I'm doing is I'm giving them one without having to think about the options. Or make a quick decision, does this default work for me? Most of the time, Scrum's great. Most of the time, Scrum's predetermined things that they say, just do this, actually work in most places. But 2 things don't. One is, do I do sprints or not? Can I plan? If I get stuff coming in every day, maybe I shouldn't have a sprint. Maybe I should just do Kanban or something like that, or flow planning.
And business cycles are different in each part of the business. There are inter-team dependencies, and Scrum is great for one team that is self-contained, that has individual roles. I mean, all the things that are defined in the Scrum Guide, which help which helped, Dr. Sutherland do what he did back in the day, and all of the Takeuchi, and yes,
And the key is
Scrum works if the conditions are right for
right.
it. Now, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about Amplio is that there's an assumption that not everyone's contacts and environment and constraints are the same.
That's right.
Just like you said, there's different planning rhythms, all this stuff. Yes. So
the key is back in the day when Scrum came out, it was about teams that are autonomous, could self-manage, we're building a product. That's not where it is much now. So you, in some cases, like autonomous cross-functional teams and time boxing, or one day, maybe 1 day time boxing instead of sprints. Those are two options that we call Amplio team offers. But the rest of it, you can set a default. Now, the beauty of it is when you find that this isn't working as well as I'd like to learn more. Now you can open it up when you want to. And you could have opened it up at the beginning and make a tailored approach, but you can open up when you want to. So this sounds complicated. I understand that, but it isn't. Not if you do it right. And this is something we talked about a lot this week. It's called patterns. And I don't mean patterns of behavior that just kind of recur. There's a lot of that. I've seen that in like the Scrum plot patterns, which are really good. They're good solutions. Here's how you solve this issue. Here's how you solve that issue. Very good library of things. The problem is there are so many problems. It gets hard to navigate if you come from here's a solution here, here's a solution here, here's a solution here, where they're very concrete patterns. And I'm talking about Chris Alexander's work. Okay, and this is my this is my top book. I mentioned The Choice as the top 3. Here's another one in the top 3. It's Timeless Way of Building by Christopher Alexander. Now, a lot of people like a pattern language where he talks about how you put all these together, and maybe that's better for some people because it's very concrete. I tend to think a little more abstractly, but in a pattern, in A Timeless Way of Building, he talks about how there's this thing called patterns that are solutions to recurring problems in a context. It's this issue of how here I am, I have this issue. What are the forces involved and how do I use those to solve it? And there must be dozens, hundreds of ways to solve it. And he's giving you a way of what to look at. And let me give you an example. Courtyard. Actually, I love the Courtyard because when I first read it, I disagreed with it. I mean, that's what I do. When I read things, if I don't like them, I don't agree with them. I don't trust anybody in that sense, but I respect them. So what I was doing is saying, well, I don't think he's right, because he was talking about courtyards. Courtyards, you have to have a crossing paths in and out. You have to have a way of seeing out so you don't feel so enclosed. You have to have kind of some private space in the courtyard so you can see what's going on. And imagine, what do they call it? Like a quad. I was, at the time I was reading this, this was way earlier, but I had been as I mentioned, at MIT, and I had been living in Cambridge, which is near, MIT is actually in Cambridge. It's not in Boston. It's across the river. And I remember reading this and I remember thinking, no, I don't agree with this. I remember this most gorgeous courtyard I had seen walking to the campus once. And it was beautiful. And then I started thinking about this courtyard, and it didn't have crossing paths. It didn't have a way out. It was just this beautiful courtyard in an apartment complex that I just walked by. And I asked myself, you know what, Al, you saw that courtyard once and you never went by it again. And I thought, why did I never go by it again? Because there wasn't on the path anywhere. I just got lost once and discovered it. So by Alexander, that wasn't the good courtyard. And I realized it wasn't a good courtyard because nobody went there except for the people who lived in the apartment complex. So that was a good something else, but not a courtyard like the Harvard Square. Harvard, that place was so beautiful. I would sometimes walk there just because it was so pretty. It was like a park. It was just gorgeous. So you discover when Alexander talks about it, here's the intention. Here's what you want to do. Here are the issues. In fact, what's interesting, 4 pages from the end of Timeless Way Building. I know it's 4 pages because I would tell this in my design patterns class. At the end, you realize the patterns aren't important. And I would joke in the class. I said, why didn't you tell me this on page 2? It's a 549-page book. And now you're telling me it's not important. And everybody laughs. But the reality is, I remember when I read that. I said, yes, I know that. The next line is, the patterns have taught you to be receptive to what's real. See, what's real in planning are like how many people are involved, how disparate are they, how big a time frame, how many dependencies, what are we working on? So what the pattern gives you, it gives you a quick solution if you want one. You can even have a default one if you want one. But if you want to go deeper, it tells you how. And the factors for effective value streams, in a sense, could be considered a distillation of a lot of these forces that are in all these patterns. In Amplio, I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's got 2 pattern languages. Pattern languages are when you collect all these patterns. What I noticed was at scale, there are about 50 things, 50 capabilities, as I first called them. Now I call them patterns at scale, that you pretty much needed to do a lot of them, or you could set defaults. And there are about 30 at the team. So Amplio contains this huge amount of information, but by using patterns, it enables you to get what you want when you need it and not be overwhelmed by it. Here's one last way to think about it, and then you can ask me some other things. Years ago, and I do mean a long time ago, like almost 20 years ago, I saw people getting trapped into Scrum's immutability. And what I did is I said, well, look, Scrum's great for quick starts. And in fact, if your team actually fits it exactly, a product team that's autonomous, that has all the skills they need, doesn't have to get involved with the rest of the organization, and knows how to build software in small bits. Yeah. It takes an hour to get a team going. And I've done this multiple times. And no follow-up. You just give them the idea of iterations and increments and sprints and things like that. It's real simple.
Well-distributed skills, levels of mastery that are within a tolerance for all those that afford the opportunity for self-management. Yeah,
but that's not the case much anymore. But the point was this, is that what I saw was a way to think about Scrum. This is something you can do starting this afternoon. Think of the Scrum guide as everything in there is an example of what you want to do. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't tell you an example of what you're trying to do from a conceptual point of view. I've written a post on this. You can message me. I'll have to dig that out. But the why. Why are we doing this? See, when you understand why we're doing something like have a product owner, why we're doing planning, when you understand that, now you have the intention you're trying to accomplish. Having that intention is like solution to a problem. Oh, there's my problem. And we're trying to overcome that problem. And now I can look to see what's the best way to solve this. So I can substitute. See, I agree. Scrum Butt as like where we're like, we have a problem, but we're having a problem with planning. So let's not do planning. No. Now you're not doing what the planning was supposed to give you. You can't do that. That gives you bad results. But is there a better way? Is there not an imposed way of doing your work, but is there a better way by finding an easier solution that gets you the same result? Then it takes less discipline. It takes less motivation. You evoke less resistance. So that's an idea. And I've been talking at the Scrum level because people are more familiar with it. But the reality is you have to go beyond. There's so much more, but I don't know that's what we did this week. I'm just looking at the list of stuff because we had.
So I have here. So we have here with patterns. Like we're there.
Oh, we got one more thing in there to cover too.
Is that the GPS or is that
no? We didn't talk about the GPS. The GPS has been. I'll mention it quickly, but the one thing though is how non-Scrum Masters and team leads can talk to devs. Okay. Because we're starting to get into that more, because that's, again, you got to talk about this. So no, the GPS, the thing about the GPS, think about it this way. Let's say we're doing we're going to go into an organization, the full organization, or 300, 400, 500 people, developers, say, in the organization. Well, I said there were about 50 things they have to do. Some more important than others, and some you can do first and the others you can do later. So it's not like they got to do all 50. But you can even start with about a half a dozen, and it can make a big difference. But what we do is we have this big graphic of the organization laid out like as not a value stream, but something like how one thing relates as a whole system. And we put that up on the screen, and we interact with executives, team leads, managers, whoever. And we say, tell us what your challenges are. See, we're doing a diagnostic. Tell me what your challenges are. What do you do when you go into a doctor's office? They don't say, oh, you need heart surgery. I can tell. No, I would get out of that office right away. Yeah. You look mean. You don't have a heart. We need to do a heart transplant. No. So what we do is we have a way to look systematically at the challenges, because people know their challenges. And then you could see, well, what solves those challenges? What pattern solution to a problem? See, they know the problem. They don't know the solution. What's the solution to a problem in their context?
Yeah.
So we
And we're
create
talking the business context. We're talking about people who are outside of information technology, business people solving problems
everybody.
for customers. Right?
Yeah, it's
the
actually
whole system.
It's the whole system.
Of people.
So you make sure the business people are there if you can get them. If you can't, there are ways to deal with that, but it's not as effective. So yeah, you talk to the business, the executives. I like to do it where I can have 30 to 60 people in the room and they work on it, or now virtually. And you find the challenges across the organization. And because we have this pattern language and because we're doing systems thinking, we can see how everything relates to everything else. And just because I've been around, I know some things you better solve first. In other words, if you wake up one morning and water's coming in from the front door, flooding your house, the problem is probably not something in the house. It's probably a dam broke upstream and is flooding the area, or there are floods from rain or something like that. So you have to look at it holistically, and then you have to see what to do. We create an improvement path. So that's what the GPS is. Anyway, and we do it with the pattern thing. But one thing we haven't talked yet about is here. And in fact, I'm going to trying to think where
share or.
I'm trying to think. I think I just have. I do have something here. I can screen share. Let me show you something we do, because this is just part of the whole issue as well. Hang on, let me get to it first. Or I can show you how I get to it, just to show you a little bit. So how do I screen share?
Should be on the bottom bar there. There's a present.
Present. And can I share screen?
Yeah, and then it'll show up in the StreamYard stage, and I'll put it on stage and
how do I say I want to use my second screen? Or maybe I can't. That's okay. I'll swap screens. So I pull this down on my primary screen. Share screen. This should be. Oh, it's giving me the choice. Well, since I moved it down here, I'll pull it down here. Share. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. So what you see here, I use lucid boards to contain information and to interactively share it with people. So how about that? Actually, since we talked about the Amplio GPS, let me just pull that up. This is where we could dynamically show things. Now, what we do also is we have a PowerPoint that sets the stage, but this is that picture I talked about where, we have like a business architecture, focus on success, strategy, product, and it's conceptually, this is kind of the value stream analysis. And they literally put stickies on this. So I'm not telling them what their problem is. They're telling me what their problem is. But what I know is that each of these things here, lean allocation, team back, each of these are a pattern. I have a pattern to solve it for them or help them solve it. And we create what's called an improvement path. So that's kind of how we work. In fact, we take this and they put around it their challenges. Like each of these boxes represents one of these bands. And the idea is to show how the context is being created by the different bands. And then we take these challenges they've said, and then there's other stuff. I'm not going to go into that today. That's not the topic of today, but let's talk about this, this other thing. So, like I said, I used to be, and I still can teach, but I have other people. David Bernstein, if you're looking for tech training, he's the guy. Okay. He's somebody who worked with me for a long time at Net Objectives. I know him very well. He's brilliant. And why is this not loading? Sometimes it takes a while.
My friend from Charlotte, Drew, wants to give you a shout out here.
Oh, yeah. Great. Yeah. Hi, Andrew. Let me try this again. Sometimes I love Lucid, but sometimes it does this. It kind of won't load right. I don't know what it had, but doesn't load right. Just load it again. Be a little patient. Okay. That's not my strength.
I didn't realize you'd moved from Miro. So
I got so frustrated with Miro, And even though actually Lucid does a lot of the same stuff, it somehow gives you a little bit of feedback so you can know what the hell is going on when you get frustrated. Plus, Lucid just behaves more naturally than Miro. I move in everything over to Lucid. So here's an example. So what this board is people, the tech practices in the Agile space, because they were made optional. And I don't care. They said, yeah, do them in Scrum. But I remember in the early days, 2000, 2001, XP was champ in the Agile space. People didn't talk much about Scrum. XP was the rage. But two things happened. One thing that happened was people didn't want to pair program. People didn't want to use this little incremental test first. And XP said, this is what you got to do, which is actually, you don't have to do that. What's important, again, different practices and different contexts. That context means people. The people you have are also a part of the context you're in. If they don't want to pair, if they don't want to do this micro test, you're not going to get XP in. And I ran out of people I could sell XP to or show them how to do XP. So I went to Scrum as a lot of other people did, but then it became optional because it wasn't in Scrum. It was something you added to it and people took, and we're all self-managing. So we're going to self-manage without these practices, which is kind of insane, but that's another story. Anyway, so what we started to do here, now let me pull up this navigation method, is, it's like, what are some practices? This right here is technical stuff. This is for people, how you do tests first, ATDD, different levels of ATD. The easiest level of acceptance test driven development is ask the question, when somebody asks you something, how will you know you've done that? So anyway, getting to this thing, how non-tech people, non-tech Scrum Masters, first of all,
so this is non-technical Scrum Masters
guiding technical teams. People are talking about how to do this. There is a way to do this.
Right.
Okay. There are, first of all, rules of the game, as I call them. First of all, pretend you don't know anything, even if you do. At least don't argue for it. You will piss off developers. They won't respect you, and they just might nod their head, oh, what an idiot. Get out of here. Mutter stuff under the breath, probably a lot worse than what I just said.
Or not in the room or in chat somewhere or in
else.
coffee.
Yeah, Scrum Master, I hate that guy. Never suggest. See, people are only experts in an area. You might be an expert in Agile, but you're not an expert in development if you can't code or haven't code, and they think they are, and they probably more than you. They are probably a lot more. Even if you're a technical Scrum Master, I would hold this to be true, by the way. Because remember I talked about how people are? If you've got the term Scrum Master, even if you've been an ex-developer, people will think of you as a Scrum Master who isn't an ex-developer. That's something the human brain does. It combines
converted project manager, facilitator, touchy-feely person.
All that. Avoid any confrontation. Don't even make suggestions, just invitations. Oh, well, maybe you should look at this. Don't, that's okay. See, an invitation means you can decline without any repercussions. A suggestion means something else. I'm suggesting you do this, and if you don't do this, you're stupid. Now, that you're stupid, I didn't say.
I know. I suggest you do this.
Yeah. So these are the rules of the game. So I've been putting together a list of things to do, and it's still in process. This board is something we build together. We've got, like I mentioned, David Bernstein. He and I are kind of working on this to make it better. He's got some great YouTubes to watch. But so one of these is actually pretty simple. You can just suggest that developers say, how will I know I've done that? This takes almost no time. And it's amazing how it validates your thinking, even when you know. I came up with this idea years back. It was actually the first Scrum team I coached. They were supporting something like, they were building a product and they were supporting something like 100 other teams that were also engineers. You'd think that when it came to asking questions and getting information, engineer to engineer, of course they know what they're saying. And I remember I talked to them about asking this question. And one of them said, oh, we want you to display this information. Now, in my mind, I was like, well, that's obvious. But I told them always, not sometimes, not when you need it, but always. And I was there sitting. I'll admit my knuckles were a little tight. Are they going to ask? Are they going to ask? I can't say anything. I got to see if they ask on their own. And the talking goes on for a minute or two, make sure we get the inputs and the outputs. And then one of them says, and how will we know we've done this? And I was like smiling inside, like you can't believe. And then they showed the engineer who wanted this request. They showed up, they just wrote on the board, hey, we want it like this. And I looked at that and says, oh my goodness, that's not how I would have done it. And that's not how the people there would have done it. They said, oh, we weren't thinking of it that way. We were thinking of it this way. So this 1 minute conversation saved them a few hours of time. And what if they didn't get a response that validated? It was 30 seconds. And it would have been, okay, we have comfort. So there are things like this you can ask. There are things like separate use from, there are things developers don't know that are really easy to do. Separating use from construction, separating system architecture from application architecture, from business architecture. Now, you can't tell them how to do it. Remember, there's no telling. But you can ask questions to see if they're paying attention. That's what all these are about. And I'm expanding on these. So I'm not going to go into them here. But this is the idea. You talk to them by asking questions to see if it's something, because you should know that this needs to happen from a non-technical point of view, even if you're not technical. And part of that is asking what happens. Yeah, anyway.
Well, I guess I was going to say this whole body of knowledge, right, that you are developing and continuing to develop with the ACEs and iterate through and kind of do that. I mean, this is part where do folks get this? How much of it is free for use on the presentation side? And that, because one thing, again, all of this stuff, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I have done my learning and can speak Amplio, right? I know the Amplio design language. It's not just the design patterns. You have to have the design language, because to be able to communicate and educate and show, that has to happen before, and it has front end that. So you as an educator are tilling the soil where Amplio can happen and value stream delivery can happen. So maybe that's a topic for another day, but we're talking about principles of learning. We're talking about principles of social change and behavior change, and shared understanding about this is Amplio and we're bringing this in for this reason, for this purpose. So what can you say about that, and how that happens when someone believes that Amplio is a way they want to go?
Am I sharing now on the screen?
I will share you.
Let me share. So there's 3 ways you can do this, actually. One way is you can learn how to do this by being in the ACE program. So just actually understand all this. Another way is bring an ACE in or myself in to do it for you and show you and coach you like I've done in the past. The third way is just improve your knowledge. So this is my website, Success Engineering Works. And one way to go to, let's go backwards in this. Let's say I just want to learn on my own. Well, just go to the presentation. I took resources, presentation, and I put a lot of videos up here. I do a lot of different videos. And here's the last one, why systems thinking is important. And if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see the next things that are coming up. So there's what we call the Amplio Community of Practice event. See, here's the one we're in right now. And this is happening not next Tuesday, because next week happens to be the week off in the ACE program. But patterns to create a configurable system. How do you use patterns as elements? So I'll be talking about that publicly to the ACOP. You can attend it live, but you've got to be in the Amplio Community of Practice. This is a different program, and it's free. And you get early
as a LinkedIn group.
No, this is actually a Thinkific program. It's a learning program, but there is I should add that link here. Make a note, add LinkedIn group. There is a LinkedIn group that you can ask me questions on and things like that. So this is one way you can get free stuff. If you want to be in the ACE program, well, if you come in here on this same page, you see you can get learning more about ACOP or the consultant journey. Now, this is a learning journey. This is the way I'm kind of doing it. It talks about the program. It talks about how to be in the program. You have different choices. Do you want to be a co-creator? A lot of people, they love working with me on expanding this. like I said, I've got 2 people who are helping me write up actually, I'm helping them write up the Amplio team thing, which is going to be something as simple as Scrum, but easier to navigate and expand and make configurable. There's some special things, like if you're an SPC, I know why SAFe stagnates and goes backwards. It's not hard to fix if you know what to do. Consulting company. So there's a lot here, and I'm adding more and more. So each of these expands out when you click it, that tells you this was something like Scrum at Scale I created in 2008, I think it was. But so that's the way you become an Amplio. Now, if you want, you can also see, I have people I've certified. I know they know how to do this. Okay. Not that many of them, but here are a few. And I have 2 levels. I have actually 3 levels, but right now I've mostly just certified the top level. These are people who can do this high view of things, and they have their own specialties. For example, Andrew knows more about security than anybody I've ever met. Simon's not actually looking for work. He works at full time as an internal consultant. So that's another thing. One of the cool things about the ACE program is you get to use the hundreds of slides that I use to kind of consolidate and demonstrate the information. And you could use those internally license free as long as you're in the program. So it's really an amazing thing. And anyway, or just message me on LinkedIn. Now, I know I really went too long today. I guess I just in one of these, you saw me bouncing around. I noticed I was bouncing around.
But hey, we are on a learning journey, are we not?
Yeah. So what we need to do, and I'm going to blame you for this, Ryan.
I can take it.
I know you can. We need to shut me off, set 45 minutes after, so we can ask more questions. And you can give me a warning 30 minutes in. But because this was a little different, because it was the first time and I needed to spend more background information. But I'd like this to be a lot more interactive with the topics that come up. What we're doing next week has a lot to do. We're going to get into patterns a lot, as I mentioned. We did do some time on it this last week, but we've got to do more. And we've got to do more on the whole learning journey and coaching stuff. So that's kind of what's on the agenda probably next week. But we do this in an incremental way. I don't plan out like the curriculum. I look at what people need at the time, and I am filling in the gap. So we have this master plan of all the stuff, but I'm building as time goes.
Because the label on the bottle for this week was the Christopher Alexander's pattern and the foundations of value streams. I think we got there. So we got there.
We covered it. And we had some side events. As you know me, I jump all over the place. That's what we used to call squirrels. So I have this thing that technically it's called attention deficit disorder. I discovered this when one of my kids was, this years ago, one of my kids was having some trouble in school, and we were researching learning journeys. I mean, not learning journeys, learning disabilities. And I had been told maybe he has ADD. So I started studying about ADD, and I can still remember going through the list of the 10 or 12 symptoms. And I said, oh, I have that. I have that. I have that. I have that. I have them all. Mild. ADD can be very severe. So I'm not trying to discount it. For some people, it's really debilitating. But for me, it's actually my strength. So I call it rapid mind movement. I don't have ADD. I have RMM, rapid mind movement. My mind just goes all over the place. So
there's a reframe.
Yeah, well, you want to reframe things that are actually your strength. So at Net Objectives, when we'd have meetings and I'd go off tangent, we'd call it a squirrel. And people would just yell, "Squirrel, squirrel!" And I had a thing on the board that we'd count how many squirrels we had in the last hour. You got to make fun. You got to make fun of how you work and how you are and what you do. That's maybe not the most effective. Anyway, I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's good fun. Yeah, I was going to bring a little bit. There's a great book by Benjamin Zander and Rosalind Zander. Ben Zander, big time conductor at Boston Symphony, and there's a book called The Art of Possibility.
Oh, I love
and
that title.
It goes through many of I think there's 12 stories and themes, but one of them is rule number 6, and I'll jump to the punchline, but don't take yourself so damn seriously.
Yeah. Well,
and
see, that was what I learned when I told you I got fired. I was taking myself very seriously, and it was devastating. And then when I learned not to, hey, I'm still Al. I'm still who I am.
Yeah.
It got easy.
Uh,
And
It
I had a
got
lot more
quite
fun the second day not being in charge. I could just be me and not worry
yeah.
about it.
Then we get into that sticky little issue of agency and who do we really need someone to be in charge, or can we be in accountability to each other? So
Yeah.
I will leave that. Maybe that's something we talk about week 5 or something. I'll turn on the music. I will put you in the backstage. We'll talk here after. And wow, what a great jam session here with Al on the premiere episode of This Week in Amplio with Al Shalloway and me, the purple squirrel, if those of you out there know what that is, Ryan Erickson. And as always, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention.